Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 5th Indonesia Tuberculosis International Research Meeting, or INATIME 2023.
Thank you so much. Yesterday, we already had joined the first day of the conference with several symposiums, and we already joined the oral and poster presentations as well. Before we start today's event, we would like to invite you to fill in a questionnaire about yesterday's event. There will be a QR code showing on the screen. So you may fill in the questionnaire first before we proceed to the next agenda. Can we see the QR code? It is over there now. You can scan via your smartphone.
Yeah, we will give you around 1 minute to fill in the questionnaire.
Or you may go to the link that can be seen on the screen as well. This INATIME 2023 brought to you by the Center for Tropical Medicine Universitas Gadjah Mada in collaboration with Kementerian Kesehatan Republik Indonesia. We would like to say our gratitude as well to our sponsors and collaborators, right?
Yes, would like to thank you to Johnson & Johnson, Fujifilm, USAID, Ministry of Health Republic of Indonesia, UBC Medical Indonesia, Yayasan KICV Indonesia, MedQuest, Tirta Medical Center, Pandu Bioscience, and Illumination Authorized, and our community partner, Bakri Center Foundation, and media partner, Harian Jogja, Star Jogja FM, Antv and TV1.
We would like to say thank you to our contributor as well. We have Dinas Kesehatan Mimika Papua, Bio Farma, Kimia Farma, Indo Farma, and Fapros. Our collaborator, we have TTR Global, CHI, STPI, and Yayasan Project Hope.
Well, I think everyone is already filled out the link provided in the screen. Or maybe you can just capture the QR code and just fill out after this.
A lot of things happened yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, like we can see the magic as well yesterday, right? But that we can see that this room were divided into two and everything.
Yes.
Yeah, in just a short time. So we would like to kindly remind you as well, dear ladies and gentlemen, to mind your belonging, because we also found a handphone. A handphone. We found a handphone yesterday, so for you or your colleagues that probably lost their cell phone, you might contact the organizing committee.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we move to the first agenda today. It is the keynote speech that will be delivered by our honorable speaker, Mr. Jeremiah Chakaya Muhwa from International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Diseases, or the Union, under the topic of Global Situation of Tuberculosis. And he has already joined us through the Zoom conference. So we will greet him first. Hello, good morning.
We still can hear you, Jeremiah. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Now it's all perfect. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremiah Chakaya Muhwa.
Thank you very much. First of all, to the organizers of this Sorry, I'm hearing an echo. I'm not sure how I deal with that. But yeah, these are the problems of doing these things remotely. I was saying thank you very much for the organizers of this great meeting, for the opportunity to speak to you today or to speak with you today. I feel greatly honored to be requested to speak in this conference. And I also feel very honored to speak on a situation that is very dear to my heart. I spent very many years trying to support the war against tuberculosis. Um, Today, I will try and cover the following areas. I would like to take a look at the burden of TB disease, try and help us understand what is driving that burden, the progress that we are making to get to control TB or to end tuberculosis, and the role of multisectoral approaches to this war against TB. Many of you will be familiar with the Global TB report. We are all expecting to see the next one, which is just around the corner. But this is the situation as far as TB was concerned by last year, 2022. In 2021, we had nearly 10.6 million people who fell ill with TB, and we were unfortunately only able to pick up on about 6.4 of those. So there's still a huge group of people that all our efforts to try and end TB or control TB are still failing to pick that group of people that have TB every year, the so-called missing people with TB. And for the first time in many years, we saw an increase in the number of people who are dying of tuberculosis. We had a significant decrease in the number of people that were being tested for TB, and all these were, of course, attributed to what was going on in 2021, the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think the bigger thing for me is the fact that in 2021, there was, between 2019 and 2020, there was a significant drop in the amount of funding that was available to support the war against tuberculosis. If you look at the global distribution of TB, you will note that tuberculosis concentrates in low and middle income countries, with big countries like India, Brazil, China, and highly populous countries like your own country in Indonesia bearing the biggest brand of tuberculosis. The same story for TB deaths. In 2020, you can see it is still the same countries that have very high rates of TB deaths. So tuberculosis today in the world is concentrated in low and middle income countries, or countries that are slightly lower down in their socioeconomic development, as it were. And this problem, which has been around for many, many years, still is among the top causes of deaths globally. In 2019, it was number 13. Yes, it was displaced a little bit by COVID-19 from 2020 to 2021 and maybe 2022, but I believe maybe in the coming years, it will creep back to its number one position as the number one cause of death from a single infectious disease. So age-old, been there for ages, doesn't seem to want to go anywhere. And therefore, we might ask ourselves, what is driving the persistence of this disease? Why are we not able to get rid of this disease that's been with us for centuries now? And you all know that WHO tries to track the 5 risk factors that are considered to be the major drivers of tuberculosis around the world: undernutrition, HIV, alcohol use disorders, smoking, and diabetes. At the national level, every country has different rates or different levels of attribution of TB to these 5 risk factors. But at the global level, you will see that undernutrition is way ahead of all the other factors as a cause of tuberculosis in the world today. And therefore, I think we all know why that is the situation. This so-called old pandemic, the oldest pandemic that we've had in the world, is largely driven by poverty. Poverty, deprivation, and inequality are the main drivers of the persistence of the TB pandemic. And this is a little surprising because we know that the global, regional, and national economies are growing. This is data from this is picked up from the International Monetary Fund, showing that world economies have been growing, GDPs have been growing, and the expectation is that GDPs and global economies and national economies will continue growing in the coming years. We've also been told, and we see this, that poverty rates are declining everywhere. Yes, there are still a lot of people who are poor, but rates of poverty are going down. And therefore, you might want to say, then what is the problem if economies are growing, if poverty rates are declining? Should TB also not be declining? And I think the bigger problem really is this, that even though economies are growing, even though poverty seems to be decreasing, we have a big problem of wealth distribution. We are creating wealth, all right, as the global community, but that wealth is unevenly distributed, and we have concentrations of poor people. And unfortunately, in some countries, those concentrations of poor people is actually increasing. If you look very carefully at this map and focus back on what we have shown before, which is the distribution, the global distribution of people with TB, you will note that, in fact, these 2 maps mirror each other. Tuberculosis tends to concentrate in those countries where there's high levels of inequality. You can see that in sub-Saharan Africa, most countries have high levels of inequality. You look at what is happening in the Americas, and you see what is happening in Southeast Asia. And these are the areas of the world where there are huge, or where there is a huge burden of tuberculosis. So we really must be thinking, and we must put our heads together to try and see how we can solve the problem of wealth creation, but with very unequal distribution of that wealth. We have a strategy that many of you are aware of, that is intending to end tuberculosis by 2030. I think we have missed those targets, to be honest with you. I don't think we will ever get there. However, it is still a good thing to think of ourselves as moving towards a target, towards a dream. And I'm not sure whether this dream will be achieved, but we need to keep going. So we set up very ambitious targets. And we have a global plan to end tuberculosis, and this global plan has come up with priority actions. The top priority actions are highlighted in this slide. We are requested to reimagine TB care, to deliver quality services through a patient or people-centered approach, scale up modern diagnostics, find people who are missing with TB, and so on and so forth. So we've got a really, really good plan that if we pursued it very well, maybe we might end this age-old problem. However, at this moment in time, this is where we are. TB incidence is falling very slowly. And in fact, in 2021, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a surge in incidence of tuberculosis. The reason for that highlighted here by the Stop TB Partnership. The Stop TB Partnership is attributing the fact that we missed the steps in 2020 up to 2021 to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we all know that we were off track already, even before the COVID-19 pandemic struck. Lack of funding has been blamed for the fact that the world is off targets. Lack of access to the latest diagnostic tests, and the very slow rollout of TB prevention in virtually every country that I've been to, in every country that I know, there's very slow rollout of TB preventive treatment, which is contributing to the fact that the world is not meeting its target to end tuberculosis. So what are the consequences then of the fact that we are in the trajectory that we are on? And again, the Stop TB Partnership has tried to model these scenarios. And it's very, very worrying indeed that if we do not change the way we are doing things, the consequences of this will be immense in terms of human suffering. So an additional 43 million people are expected to develop tuberculosis if we remain on the current trajectory, and there will be 6.6 million additional TB deaths, and the economic costs of tuberculosis could hit $1 trillion US. We will lose $234 million if we do not change the way we are doing things. So the trajectory of tuberculosis as it is now, if we do not do something different, if we don't do something innovative, will be enormous in terms of the consequences to human beings. What is our current paradigm? The current paradigm is basically this one. We need to identify people who are at risk of TB, the so-called key and vulnerable population, screen them for tuberculosis, test them for TB, diagnose TB, treat them, and hopefully get them to become healthy, have good quality of life, and make them no longer vulnerable to TB. Unfortunately, what is happening currently is that people get treated for TB, but they go back into the same situation where they remain vulnerable to TB, and the cycle continues over and over again. So we are again in a very cyclical kind of way. We need to change this paradigm so that we make people no longer vulnerable to TB, and social support programs may be extremely useful for achieving that particular purpose. So this is our biomedical approach that we have pursued for a long time, and we are trying as hard as possible to continue to support countries, or rather to help ourselves to move in this direction. We want to find all people with TB, initiate appropriate treatment as rapidly as possible. At this moment in time, in 2023, it's key that every individual who has TB knows what their drug susceptibility profile is so that appropriate treatment can be offered. We wanted to identify people who have comorbidities, and those comorbidities are then treated appropriately or managed appropriately. We want to offer support, treatment support, and other forms of treatment support to these individuals. And we want to offer those who have TB infection and not TB disease appropriate treatment so that we can prevent progression of that infection to disease. But we may ask ourselves, is the biomedical approach sufficient? Is it enough that we just find people with TB and do everything that we need to do to find them and treat them? I think we need to learn from what happened in the past, especially in those countries that currently today have very low rates of TB. What happened in high-income countries? I think the most important thing that we all should continue to remember is that the power to end TB may actually not be simply in biomedical approaches, but it may actually be in wealth creation and distribution. Many of you have seen this figure before, which shows that TB rates in England and Wales, and this could be in any other country, Australia, it could be in Canada and all those other places, that TB rates were actually going down. Both deaths, cases, case fatality were going down long before the first anti-TB medicine became available, streptomycin in the 1940s. And the key reason why these things happen is because there was an improvement in the socioeconomic status of the populations in those countries. There was somehow social programs and many other things that made the quality of life improve markedly, better nutrition, better housing, better healthcare, better access to healthcare, and so on and so forth. And I think we should remember that maybe this, at the end of the day, is what is going to get us to where we want to get with tuberculosis. So Nelson Mandela did this. I think all of you know this great man from Africa, that overcoming poverty is not an act of charity. It is an act of justice. And I want to emphasize this, that at the end of the day, we need to look at programs. We need to embrace programs, and we need to push governments to be able to, yes, improve our economies, but much more importantly, make sure that we are lifting people out of poverty. We are creating just systems where you don't have extreme poor people. We are avoiding the unnecessary wars that we see all over the world that displace people, that increase poverty among segments of the population, and so on and so forth. This is an important thing that we all must remember, and this may be the answer to this age-old problem of tuberculosis. So the biosocial approach, therefore, requires that we focus attention on poverty alleviation by doing a lot of things. I am not a poverty expert, but I want to believe that in many countries in the world, in many of the countries where tuberculosis remains a big problem, agriculture still contributes significantly to the economies of those countries. So we need to transform agriculture and improve population nutrition. We need to transform our cities, as you can imagine, in all those countries where tuberculosis is a big problem right now. Our cities are growing, and they're growing really, really large, but they're growing with an urban population that is primarily living in slums. And the more slum population you have, the more TB you will have. And so we need to transform our cities by building better houses and housing people in a decent way. We need to enhance the access and quality of education. Education is a great equalizer. It helps people move out of poverty, and therefore we need to transform how people access education and the quality of that education. We must address inequities, including gender-related inequities and many other issues. So this is really where the focus of attention should be, in addition to the biomedical approaches that we know finding people who are sick, finding the money, finding those who are infected and not sick, and treating all those. If we forget to do this, then we will go through that cyclical thing that I just spoke about, where we get people or we identify people who are unwell with TB, we treat them, we push them back into the same pool of vulnerability, and the cycle continues. And we need to break that cycle. So to tie it together, and this is my last slide, our best shot seems to be a multi-sectoral approach, combining both biomedical and biosocial approaches, strengthening our healthcare systems, acting across borders, carrying communities with us, identifying change and trying to act on it as quickly as possible. If there are new pockets of TB because of new pockets of poverty, we need to act and reach those communities, not just with health services, but with all these other things that they need to be able to improve their quality of life. We need to sharpen our creativity and our innovativeness to bring new things onto the table and to overcome program implementation bottlenecks by improving technical and managerial capacity and functionality of our programs, and very importantly, understanding our programs through and improving our programs through operations, health systems, and implementation research. And all these things at the end of the day will require a committed, visionary, and focused leadership. And I want to say here that a few months ago, I was in your country, in Indonesia, and I think I saw two things that gave me a lot of hope for that country. The presidential initiative on tuberculosis, and the health minister at that time, I hope he's still in the same position, who was highly committed, very visionary, very enthusiastic about tuberculosis. That to me was visionary and focused leadership. And if that continues, at least we will see Indonesia get out of the pool of countries that have a big problem of tuberculosis. So thank you very much for listening to me. And I'm happy to take questions if I'm allowed to do that. Thank you very much.